Tonight, Britain stands on the edge of history. Just minutes ago, in a move no one thought possible, former U.S. President Donald Trump has declared the UK-US alliance officially over a relationship that stood for more than a century, built on war, trade, and trust shattered in one sentence. And inside number 10, Downing Street panic. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, once the symbol of post-Brexit stability, is now a leader on the brink. Phones ringing, ministers resigning, and a nation asking one terrifying question: has Britain just lost its place in the world? It happened in Florida, a rally that was meant to be routine. Trump walked onto the stage with his trademark confidence, American flags billowing behind him. Then, without warning, he looked straight into the camera and said, "The United States will no longer deal with a government that betrays its own people and its allies." Within seconds, every network cut live. The crowd roared, but in London, silence. Across Westminster, phones buzzed. Diplomats froze mid-sentence. Inside the Cabinet Office, one advisor was heard whispering, "He can't mean us," but he did. For months, Washington and London had been quietly at odds over defense budgets, over Ukraine, over post-Brexit trade terms. Trump believed Starmer had betrayed America's trust by courting Brussels too closely. Now, the retaliation was public and final. Within 10 minutes, alliance over was trending across the planet. The pound plunged 2% in under an hour. And in the heart of London, television screens lit up with 5 unthinkable words: U.S. cuts ties with Britain. Inside Parliament, chaos. Live feeds showed MPs on their feet, shouting, arguing, demanding answers. The speaker banged his gavel for order, but there was none. Starmer sat at the front bench, pale, motionless, a file of briefing papers trembling in his hands. The opposition leader rose. "You've lost America, Prime Minister. You've lost Britain." The chamber erupted a roar of anger and disbelief. For a moment, Starmer looked ready to speak, then didn't. It was the silence of a leader who knew the ground had vanished beneath him. Outside, reporters gathered in the rain, flashing lights reflecting off the black iron gates. "Is the Prime Minister resigning?" one shouted. No answer came, only the rumble of engines as police convoys arrived to tighten security around Downing Street. Behind those doors, the War Council had begun. Advisors argued over what to say and how to say it. One urged calm and diplomacy. Another slammed a binder on the table and snapped, "Calm won't save us now." In Washington, Trump's words had already become policy. Within an hour, the State Department announced a comprehensive review of all bilateral arrangements with the United Kingdom. A diplomat's way of saying the deal is dead. Joint defense briefings suspended. Trade talks frozen. Intelligence sharing paused until further notice. On Capitol Hill, Republican senators cheered the move as a long-overdue correction of a one-sided relationship. Across the aisle, Democrats called it reckless, but few disagreed that the damage was irreversible. Back in London, traders watched the numbers plummet. One analyst murmured to a colleague, "It's like Brexit all over again, but worse." By mid-morning, the Bank of England was forced to intervene, buying billions in sterling to halt the slide. But this wasn't just economics. Deep inside the Ministry of Defense, an entire wing of servers went dark access revoked from the joint NATO database, maintained in Virginia. One general described it as like having the lights cut mid-operation. Britain's defense dependence on American satellite feeds and intel networks was absolute. Now disconnected military. Officials met in haste. Could France or Germany fill the gap? Unlikely. Europe was hesitant, unsure whether to embrace Britain or keep its distance from Trump's wrath. For the first time since the Second World War, Britain stood strategically alone, and in the eyes of many that is the real terror of this moment. By evening, the mood inside number 10 was described by staff as apocalyptic. Resignations piled up, one after another. The defense secretary, gone. The trade minister, gone. Even the chief whip walked out, muttering to reporters, "We can't defend the indefensible." Starmer remained seated at his desk, watching the broadcast loops of Trump's speech playing again and again. His eyes didn't move. He whispered to no one in particular. He went too far this time. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just Trump. It was months of hesitation, half measures, and contradictions that brought him here. He had tried to please both Brussels and Washington, and ended up alienating them both. An aide entered quietly, laying a draft statement on the desk, a resignation speech, prepared just in case. For a long moment, the Prime Minister stared at it, then slid it aside. Outside, the streets of London had turned into a theater of rage. Crowds surged through Whitehall chanting, "Resign! Resign!" and waving British and American flags. Police in riot gear lined the barricades. In Parliament Square, a young student held a sign that read, "Britain abandoned." A retired veteran beside him said quietly, "I fought next to Americans." Now they've walked away. Television screens across the country split between Trump's victory speech in Florida and the chaos unfolding in London. Two nations once bound by brotherhood, now divided by blame. By midnight, Downing Street was a siege zone. Lights burned in every window. Journalists camped outside beneath umbrellas, their microphones fogged with rain. Inside, Starmer's core team met one final time. The Foreign Secretary arrived late, furious. "They've cut our intel feeds," she snapped. "They don't trust us anymore." Starmer rubbed his temples. There must be a way back, but there was only silence. When the clock struck 2, the message leaked to the press cabinet members preparing letters of no confidence. One headline read, "Starmer will not survive the night." At 6 a.m., London woke to grey skies and sirens. Inside number 10, the Prime Minister sat alone, hands folded, eyes fixed on the Union Jack flag behind his desk. Reporters waited outside the black door for the words they knew were coming. By 8 a.m., the BBC confirmed the inevitable. A draft transition plan was already circulating among Labour officials. At 11:45, the podium was set. Cameras rolled. The door opened. Starmer stepped out, shoulders stiff, rain dripping from his coat. He looked up once at the gathered press and began, "It has been the honor of my life to serve this nation. But I cannot govern a country divided and isolated. I have therefore informed His Majesty of my intention to resign as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom." A flash of light, 1,000 camera shutters, and it was over. The speech lasted 4 minutes, but it marked the end of a century of Anglo-American unity across the Atlantic. Trump addressed supporters again. He called it a new era of American sovereignty. In Brussels, leaders met in emergency session, debating whether to re-engage with London or let it drift. No decision came. Back home, the pound remained unstable. Investors fled, and Britain's media, once defiant, now spoke in hushed tones about a nation adrift between alliances, unsure of its place in the world. Historians will argue for years about this day whether Trump ended the special relationship out of principle or power, whether Starmer's fall was fate or failure. But for the millions watching around the world, it felt like something greater had dyed the illusion that Britain still mattered as it once did. Tonight, as Big Ben chimes over a city that feels suddenly smaller, Britons are left with a new reality. No special relationship, no guaranteed partner across the Atlantic, just a cold wind of uncertainty sweeping through Whitehall. In the halls of Parliament, they say you can still hear the words of one anonymous MP as he left the chamber last night. "We built an empire on alliances. Now we can't even keep a friend." Perhaps that's how history always turns, not with explosions, but with echoes. An old relationship burning out in the cold light of modern politics. And so, tonight, Britain faces its own reflection. A nation once defined by its alliances, now defined by its isolation. A leader who rose on promises of unity, now brought down by a single sentence spoken half a world away. From Downing Street to the White House, from the halls of power to the streets of London, the message is clear: trust is fragile. And in the age of instant speech and viral rage, empires can collapse in a heartbeat.